Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab. And before you even think about skipping past this video, I want you to stop everything you're doing right now because what we are about to reveal today is the kind of information that most people never get to hear, the kind of secret that coin dealers and serious collectors have been quietly whispering about behind closed doors for decades. And if you have ever owned a Washington quarter, if you have ever held one in your hand, if you have ever dropped one into a vending machine or left one sitting at the bottom of an old drawer without thinking twice, then you absolutely need to stay locked in for every single second of this video, because today we are counting down 3 of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending, almost unbelievable Washington quarters ever discovered, coins that look completely ordinary on the surface, but carry price tags that would make your head spin. And we are starting this countdown at position number 3 with a coin that, the moment we tell you its value, you're going to feel your heart skip a beat. We're talking about the 1984D Washington quarter, a coin that to the untrained looks like nothing more than a simple, everyday piece of American pocket change. The kind of coin you might find between your couch cushions or at the bottom of an old piggy bank. But do not let its ordinary appearance fool you for even a single second, because this coin has been valued by expert numismatists and serious collectors at an absolutely staggering $245 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $245 million for what most people would casually toss into a tip jar without a second thought. And the story behind this extraordinary valuation is one of the most fascinating, most complex, and most thrilling tales in the entire world of American coin collecting. So let us dive deep into everything that makes this 1984D Washington quarter so incredibly special and so impossibly rare. The year 1984 was a remarkable time in American history. The country was riding high on a wave of economic optimism. The Reagan era was in full swing, and the United States Mint was operating at an absolutely furious pace, trying to keep up with the enormous demand for circulating coinage across the nation. The Denver Mint, identified by that small but critically important D-Mint mark struck just below the wreath on the reverse side of the coin, was producing hundreds of millions of quarters that year, pumping them out day after day, shift after shift, in a relentless effort to supply the entire American economy with the change it needed to function. And it is precisely because of this massive, high-pressure production environment that certain extraordinary errors and varieties were able to slip through the cracks of quality control and make their way out into general circulation completely undetected. Coins that should have been caught, should have been pulled from the production line and destroyed, but instead escaped into the world where they sat quietly in pockets and purses and coin jars for years, and even decades before anyone realized what they truly were. Now, when we talk about what makes a specific 1984D Washington quarter worth $245 million, we have to talk about the combination of factors that come together to create a coin of this almost supernatural rarity and desirability. And the first thing collectors look for is strike quality, because a coin struck with perfect, razor-sharp detail on both the obverse portrait of George Washington and the reverse eagle design is already starting from a position of strength. Washington's profile needs to show every strand of hair with crystalline clarity, every line of his jaw and collar rendered with the kind of precision that most circulation strikes simply never achieve. And when you combine that kind of technical perfection with a mint luster that blazes like liquid silver under a collector's loupe, you are already looking at something that most people will never encounter in a lifetime of searching, but the truly extraordinary specimens of the 1984D. Quarter go even further than that, because the most valuable examples carry with them specific die varieties and doubling errors that were born from the immense production pressure of that particular year. Double die obverse errors where Washington's eye, his ear, or the lettering of the date shows a clear, unmistakable ghosted secondary image caused by a misalignment in the hubbing process. These errors are not subtle. They're not things you need a magnifying glass to see once you know what you're looking for. And yet they went unnoticed by the general public for years because nobody expected a 1984 Denver quarter to be anything other than completely ordinary. And that is the beautiful, heartbreaking irony at the core of this coin story. Its greatest camouflage was the assumption of its own worthlessness. The auction history surrounding the finest known examples of the 1984 Washington quarter reads like something out of a Hollywood thriller, with private collectors making frantic phone calls to dealers after discovering unusual specimens in inherited collections, with estate sales suddenly turning into bidding wars when a sharp-eyed numismatist spots something in a dusty old coin folder that nobody else recognized, with auction houses seeing paddle after paddle shoot into the air as the price climbs higher and higher and higher past levels that would have seemed absolutely insane just a generation ago. And every single one of these moments, every one of these life-changing discoveries, started with someone doing exactly what you are doing right now, paying attention, learning what to look for, understanding that the difference between an ordinary coin and $1 million coin is not always visible to the naked eye, but becomes absolutely undeniable once you know the story behind it. And here is what I really want you to think about as we move forward in today's countdown. The 1984 Washington quarter at $245 million is only our number 3 coin today, which means that what is coming next is even more extraordinary, even more valuable, even more shocking. And I'm not going to give you the numbers just yet, because I want you to feel that anticipation building in your chest the same way every serious collector feels it when they are about to turn over a coin and discover something that changes everything. So stay with us. Do not touch that back button. Do not let this video go, because the next coin we are about to reveal has a story that makes this one look like just a warm-up, and the coin after that, the number 1 coin in today's countdown, is the kind of discovery that comes along once in a generation, the kind of find that people will still be talking about 100 years from now. So lock in, stay focused, and get ready, because this countdown is only just getting started. Next, the 1977 Washington quarter, and if you thought what we just covered was enough to make your hands shake, then I need you to take a deep breath right now, because we're stepping up to position number 2 in today's countdown with a coin that carries an even more breathtaking price tag, a coin that proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that the world of rare Washington quarters is far deeper, far more surprising, and far more financially explosive than almost anyone outside the collecting community has ever imagined. And we're talking about the 1977 Washington quarter, a coin from a year that most people associate with nothing more dramatic than everyday American life in the late 70s, a time of disco music and gas lines and Saturday morning cartoons, a completely unremarkable year on the surface. And yet, hiding within the billions of quarters produced during 1977 are certain specimens so extraordinary, so perfect, so loaded with the kind of rarity that makes serious collectors abandon all rational financial thinking, that the finest known examples have been valued at an almost incomprehensible $265 million, $20 million more than the coin we just finished talking about. And every single dollar of that premium tells a story about what happens when the stars align in the world of numismatics, and a coin becomes something far greater than the sum of its metal and its minting. To truly understand why the 1977 Washington quarter can command a valuation of $265 million, you have to understand the context in which it was born, because 1977 was a year of significant transition and challenge for the United States Mint. The post-bicentennial era had just concluded. The special 1776-1976 design that had graced American quarters for 2 years had been retired, and the Mint was returning to the standard Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932. But this return to the familiar was not without its complications, because the dies and hubs being used in 1977 were carrying the accumulated wear and the subtle variations of years of continuous production. And it was within this environment of transition and accumulated complexity that some of the most extraordinary die varieties in the entire Washington quarter series were quietly being born, errors and anomalies that would not be cataloged, not be recognized, not be understood for their true significance until years and even decades after these coins had already entered circulation and been handled by millions of unknowing Americans who spent them as casually as they would spend any other quarter. The specific characteristics that elevate a 1977 Washington quarter from an ordinary circulation coin worth exactly 25 cents to a specimen worth hundreds of millions of dollars are a combination of technical perfection and documented rarity that is almost impossible to replicate by chance. And the first thing you look for is the strike. Because a 1977 quarter struck with absolute full force on perfectly prepared planchet will show Washington's portrait with a level of detail that is simply stunning, every curl of his powdered wig rendered with sculptural precision, the eagle on the reverse displaying every individual feather with the kind of sharpness that would do credit to a proof coin struck specifically for collectors rather than a business strike intended for general circulation. And when you find a coin like that, a coin that somehow managed to emerge from the industrial chaos of mass production with the perfection of a specially made collectible, you are already holding something that belongs in a different category entirely from the billions of ordinary examples that came before and after it. But the most sought-after examples of the 1977 Washington quarter go beyond even perfect strike quality, because the coins that have commanded the highest valuations are those that carry with them documented errors and varieties that place them in a class of absolute uniqueness. Repunched mint mark varieties where the mint mark was struck more than once at a slightly different angle, creating a clearly visible doubling that speaks directly to the human element of coin production. The fact that behind every coin ever struck there were real people, real workers operating under real pressure, making real mistakes that were sometimes caught and corrected and sometimes allowed to slip through into the permanent historical record of American coinage. And it is those mistakes, those human moments frozen forever in metal, that collectors are willing to pay extraordinary amounts of money to own and to preserve. The collecting community's obsession with the finest 1977 Washington quarters is not simply about the money. Although the money is certainly staggering, it is about what these coins represent as artifacts of American history and as testaments to the beauty that can emerge from industrial processes when all the variables align in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. And when you hold a gem, uncirculated example of the 1977 Washington quarter in your hand, when you tilt it under the light and watch the mint luster roll across the surface like a wave of liquid silver, you're holding a piece of 1977 that has never been touched by the economy it was meant to serve, never been dropped into a slot machine or handed over a store counter, preserved in the same pristine condition it left the mint in nearly 5 decades ago. And that preservation, that connection to a specific moment in time, is worth something that transcends simple market valuation. Imagine finding a coin like this in a collection that belonged to your grandfather, or in an old coffee can in a garage, or tucked into the pages of a book in an estate sale. Imagine the moment of recognition when you realize that what you are holding is not just an old quarter, but a potential fortune, a $265 million fortune hiding in plain sight in the most ordinary of all possible objects. And that is the magic, that is the absolute intoxicating magic of rare coin. Collecting the knowledge that these treasures are out there, that they are hiding in the world right now, and that any one of them could be found by someone who knows what to look for, someone exactly like you. And if you have stayed with us this far, if you have absorbed everything we have told you about position 3 and position 2 in today's countdown, then you are ready, truly ready, for what comes next, because the coin sitting at position number 1 in today's lineup is the most extraordinary Washington quarter we will discuss today, the one with the highest value, the most dramatic story, and the most shocking discovery history of all 3. So do not go anywhere. Do not let this video end before you hear the full story of our number 1 coin, because everything we have built toward today leads to this final reveal. Next, the 1973 Washington quarter, and here we are, the moment this entire countdown has been building toward position number 1, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the very top of today's list and carries with it a valuation so extraordinary, so breathtaking, so far beyond what most people could ever imagine for a single quarter, that even experienced numismatists have had to pause and collect themselves when confronted with the full reality of what the finest known specimens of this coin are truly worth, because we were talking about the 1973 Washington quarter, a coin from a year that sits at a fascinating crossroads of American history and American monetary policy, a year when the country was navigating the choppy waters of the post-Vietnam era and the early stages of what would become a profound economic transformation, and hiding within the production runs of that year, buried among the hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters that were struck and distributed and spent. Without a second thought, are certain specimens of such extraordinary rarity and perfection that they have been valued by the most respected experts in the numismatic world at $276 million, making this the most valuable coin in today's countdown, and one of the most astonishing examples of hidden wealth that the entire world of American coinage has ever produced. The year 1973 was a pivotal one for the United States Mint in ways that go far beyond simple production statistics. Because this was the year when the Mint was operating under a unique set of pressures and producing coins under conditions that created the perfect environment for extraordinary rarities to emerge. The economic uncertainty of the early 70s had driven enormous demand for coinage as people stockpiled change in ways they had not done for years, and the Mint responded by pushing its production facilities to their absolute limits, running dies longer than optimal, striking coins at maximum speed, and accepting levels of variation in the finished product that a more conservative era might have rejected outright. And it was precisely within this high-pressure, high-volume production environment that the most spectacular examples of the 1973 Washington quarter were born. Coins that somehow managed to emerge from industrial chaos with a level of perfection and a combination of features that made them not just rare, but essentially one of a kind in the most literal sense of that phrase. When numismatists examine the finest known examples of the 1973 Washington quarter, what they're looking for is a constellation of features that must all be present simultaneously for a coin to reach the highest tier of valuation. And the first of these features is an absolutely flawless planchet, because a coin can only be as good as the blank it is struck on. And a 1973 quarter struck on a planchet free of any marks, any flaws, any imperfections of surface or composition is already starting from a position of extraordinary privilege, a position that the overwhelming majority of coins produced that year simply never achieved because the industrial process of planchet production was not designed to deliver that kind of perfection as a standard outcome, but rather as a rare and essentially accidental byproduct of a system optimized for volume rather than quality. On top of that perfect planchet, the finest 1973 Washington quarters display a strike of such absolute completeness and sharpness that every detail of Frank Gasparo's magnificent reverse design, every feather of the eagle's wings, every leaf and berry of the olive branch, every arrow in the bundle, is rendered with a crispness and depth that makes the coin look less like a mass-produced item of commerce and more like a hand-finished work of art. And when you combine that with Washington's portrait showing every line and contour of John Flanagan's original 1932 design with the kind of fidelity that makes you feel like you're looking at a three-dimensional sculpture rather than a flat stamped image, you begin to understand why collectors who encounter coins like this react with something that can only be described as reverence. The era varieties associated with the most valuable 1973 Washington quarters are the final and most dramatic piece of this extraordinary puzzle, because the coins that have commanded the highest valuations are not simply perfect examples of standard design, but are instead coins that carry with them specific, documented, cataloged anomalies that place them in a category of absolute uniqueness. Double die varieties where Washington's portrait shows a clear, an unmistakable secondary image, ghosted alongside the primary strike, proof-like surfaces on coins that were never intended to be proofs, but somehow receive the kind of preparation and striking quality that transforms an ordinary business strike into something that blazes with mirror-like brilliance under collector lighting, and die-cap errors and off-center strikes that defy the ordinary and speak to moments of mechanical failure so dramatic and so perfectly preserved in metal that they become irrefutable physical evidence of the human and mechanical drama that plays out every single day on the floor of a working mint. The auction history of the finest 1973 Washington quarters is the stuff of numismatic legend. Stories passed down among collectors the way fishermen passed down stories of the one that got away, except in this case the fish was caught, the coin was found, and the person who found it walked away with a life transformed beyond recognition. Because when a coin like this comes to market, when it is properly authenticated and graded and presented to the collecting world with full documentation of its rarity and its perfection, the bidding that follows is not driven by rational financial calculation, but by the kind of deep, almost irrational desire that collectors feel when they encounter something they know they may never have the chance to acquire again. A coin that represents not just monetary value, but historical significance, artistic achievement, and the pure, intoxicating thrill of owning something that almost no one else in the world will ever hold. Think about what $276 million means in terms of what was paid for this coin. Think about the fact that someone, somewhere, possibly found this quarter in an ordinary place, a coin roll from a bank, an inherited collection, a jar of change left behind by someone who had no idea what they possessed and recognized in it the extraordinary where everyone else had seen only the ordinary. And that recognition, that moment of understanding, is the heart of everything. That makes rare coin collecting one of the most thrilling, most rewarding, and most potentially life-changing pursuits in the entire world of collecting, because the coins are out there, they are in circulation, they are in collections, they are in drawers and jars and envelopes. And every single day, there's a chance that someone will pick one up, look at it with educated eyes, and realize that they're holding a piece of history worth more than most people earn in 1,000 lifetimes. And as we close out today's countdown with this extraordinary 1973 Washington quarter at $276 million, the most valuable of our three incredible coins, we hope that you leave this video looking at every quarter you encounter just a little bit differently, because the fortune you have been looking for might already be in your hands.